Hello and welcome to the Michael Clark Show podcast, where every Wednesday I'll bring you an interview with a different special guest. Many will be from the world of sport. All of them have a story worth sharing. In a time when doom and gloom is all too easy to find, this is a place where we'll be promoting the positive. So I hope you'll keep me company each week as I explore where our guests get their motivation and inspiration from to succeed. Welcome back. It is episode 8 of the podcast, and it's a special number for this man. He wore it for a good part of his career, certainly. No stranger to anybody from the same neck of the woods as me. He's played for two of Northern Ireland's biggest teams, Northern Ireland's two biggest teams, they'll make sure to say, Linfield and Glentoran, but he's doing a brilliant job out in Canada, and we're going to be talking about that. A warm welcome, Daryl Fordyce.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Michael.
It's good to talk to you. And first of all, how's life in Canada? I can tell you it's still rainy and miserable here.
Well, it's just started to snow today again. I thought we got rid of the snow, and I look outside now and it's just started to snow again. But yeah, I thought the snow was gone. We were trying to get onto the pitch soon, but again, it's started to drop again.
That is something probably takes a bit of getting used to, considering, you know, when you're back home, 2 inches of snow and the whole country grinds to a halt. That doesn't happen in Canada.
Not at all. Everyone has winter tires on here, and then the tractors are out clearing the snow first thing. But it actually rained here. Was it 2 days ago it rained here? First time, and I remember saying to my son, when was the last time you seen rain? Because it doesn't rain often here. Maybe June a little bit, but again, it snows. But nothing comes to a stop unless it's really.
First thing that struck me is you've kept your accent. You know, you may be away from home, but you've still kept that part of it. You haven't gone all Graham McDowell or anything like that.
Well, I've learned to adjust depending on who I'm speaking to. So yeah, whenever I speak to people back home, I can speak normal a lot quicker. When I'm here, I have to slow it down and sort of put on a little Canadian accent and use certain words like a diaper instead of a nappy, things like that, you know.
That must be one of the strange things when you move abroad anywhere, I guess, and you're trying to settle in and not just even communicating with your teammates, going to the shops and anything, and things that you say confuse people.
Yeah. Like I remember when we first came here, we wanted some aluminium foil, tin foil. And I was asking the shop worker, like, have you any aluminium? Didn't understand the word I said. I was like, tin foil. Still didn't know. And then eventually I found out they say aluminum. So if you say aluminum foil, you'll get what you want. You know, so just simple things like that. And as I said, even you go in and where's the nappies? They don't say nappies. They don't really say, I'm speaking because I have a kid now, so a pram, things like that. They're called strollers, and so you got to get used to it. Garbage, all that stuff.
I got really confused in Tim Hortons because I was talking when I was in Vancouver, and I said, "Oh, that's grand," and they were like, "Oh, it isn't, but we can get you that." And I was like, "What?" And I didn't realize. I was just meaning obviously it's fine, but the girl served me had no clue what was going on.
The grand, that just means a bigger size. It's like getting into Starbucks and asking for a grande. So they do the same thing.
So it was just one of those awkward moments where something as innocent as me trying to say, yep, that's perfectly fine, thank you, made her panic that she'd served me wrong.
Don't worry, I have those every other day, those awkward moments, especially when we go through a drive-through, like a Tim Hortons or Starbucks drive-through. And if me and my wife's in the car, I'll say, can I have, say, 2 coffees? And they always think I'm saying 3. So it's like, okay, 3 coffees. I'm like, no, 2 coffees. And they're like, 3. So the amount of times I just leave it, get up to the counter to pay, and usually it's say $5 for a coffee, and they go $15. I just say, no, 2. So I can actually use my fingers, and then they cancel the other one. That happens all the time with me and my wife.
Well, I can understand you perfectly well, obviously. So this is going to go swimmingly. I was saying to you just before we came on, I was chatting to a really good mate of yours, Albert Watson, and I didn't realise that you went as far back as you did, because obviously we'll be talking about your playing career, but you grew up together.
Yeah. You know, we both came from Sandy Row. Obviously, Albert lived in White Abbey for a while. with his mum. But you know, I used to always see him in Sandringham all the time, and the two of us played in St Andrews together for a few years, and then whenever I get held back to my proper year, that's whenever Albert moved on up the years. But we haven't known each other for since we were kids, and you know, I speak to him every other day still. And we played at Linfield together. We played in Edmonton together, and you know, it's fair to say that the two of us miss each other's banter, so to speak, and just being around each other, I guess. But no, he's a fantastic friend, one of my best friends, and you know, he's a friend that you can ask for advice. You know, one of those guys. Whenever you're stuck in a little, you don't know what. You say you're stuck with something, you can just throw it out there to him, and he'll give his advice, and it's always a proper leader, I would say. You know, so I could speak to him as a friend and as a teammate still, really. But yeah, I do miss the big man, and I can't wait to see him again.
I think you dug him out of more than a few holes in his time as well. Is it fair to say he takes things at quite a slow pace, and maybe, you know, you're the more organised one?
Yeah, whenever we were roommates, it was me that was waking him up in the morning. Well, fairly, I would go to bed. I usually like to go to bed around 10, 11. Now it's around 9 or 10 because of a kid. But yeah, whenever we were roommates on away trips, I would go to bed 11. I would wake up at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock to go to the toilet, and he's still watching his iPad. So that's why in the morning whenever I get up, I was ready and all, and I would give him a shake. But the thing with Albert is you don't get Albert until he has his coffee. When he hasn't got his coffee in him, there's no point in even looking at him or talking to him. So every morning I would just say, Albert, it's 8:30. Need to get breakfast with training in a couple of hours. And we wouldn't really say a word until he actually got his coffee in his hand. But no, we had some fabulous times on away trips with Edmonton, and some great times. And you know, we leant on each other for support, and just, you know, a lot of our away trips were in America. Two boys from Northern Ireland, just in America. It was great.
Oh, imagine it was. Apparently, he nearly missed a flight one morning when he was rooming with Proctor, and you basically saved the day.
Yeah, well, he actually did miss the flight, one of the flights. It was me and Robert Garrett was actually on loan. We had him on loan from Linfield as well, good friend. And I was rooming with Robert, and Albert was rooming with David Proctor. He's in Scotland. But, you know, the two of them slept in, and we tried to wake them up. And by the time that we did wake them up, we used to have rental cars. So we would have those family cars on away trips. And then the manager just says, right, let's go. But he didn't really give them 5 minutes. And the two of them actually ended up missing the flight. And they had to take a different route back, because whenever we were in Fort Lauderdale actually. So we had to take, sometimes it was a minimum of 2 flights. Sometimes it was 3 flights. But them two ended up, I don't know where they ended up. I think they ended up in Houston, and then they finally made it back the next day, I think.
My goodness. There's some amount of travelling involved in that. But if we take you right back, I mean, you were travelling away from home when you were, 10 years of age, going over to Rangers and stuff. So you must have got used to it quite quickly.
Yeah. I was with St Andrews, and Joe Kincaid, he ran St Andrews, and he was also the Glasgow Rangers scout. So I just remember one Christmas morning, I was only 10, and actually I think it was only 9. It had been 10, my birthday a week after Christmas. So it was Christmas morning, and my dad says to me, I've got one of your best presents, but I can't give it to you for 3 days. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he says, look, Glasgow Rangers want you over. I'm like, what for? To watch a game or what? He says, no, they want you over on trial. You're going over with Joe Kincaid and a couple of the other boys that were there from St Andrews. And I went over, and, you know, I went from 10 till I was 16 years of age. And, you know, Rangers would have flown me over every other week, every Easter, just after Christmas, you know, be over for a couple of weeks and take me to pre-season tours. Like I went to Holland and stuff, and we ended up we made the final once against Barcelona, and Messi played, Piqué played, Fabregas played, and Barcelona destroyed us. I only found that out a few years ago. I just remember the game that Barcelona destroyed us 2-0 in the final. But my Rangers team, we had a very good team. We beat Arsenal and Feyenoord and Club Brugge on the way. But once we played Barcelona, I says to my dad, look, we didn't get the ball off them. We couldn't get the ball. And we actually thought some of their players were ringers. But it happened that they were just so good, too quick, too technical. But yeah, I used to go over 10 years of age, and a couple of times I would fly over, and one of the coaches would forget to pick me up. So I'd be in Glasgow Airport as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old waiting. And back then there was no mobiles. You had to use the payphone. So I'd get on the payphone and hit the reverse charges to my mum's house and tell my dad, hey, there's no one here. Then he had to call Joe, and then Joe would call Rangers, and they were like, oh, we totally forgot about it.
That's unbelievable.
As a kid. But yeah, it lets you grow up a lot quicker.
I imagine it did, stuck in Glasgow Airport on your own. That is remarkable who you played against. So many footballers, when you talk to them, have stories like that, don't they? When they say, because you don't remember the players, because at that point they're not world famous. Lionel Messi's just some other kid who's really good at football. It's only, I guess, now you can look back and think, can't believe I was on the same pitch as one of, if not the greatest ever player.
Yeah, it's the same as our Northern Ireland under-17s. We made the finals in the Euros, and obviously we played France, and they had Ben Arfa, Nasri, and then Benzema actually come off the bench. But I just remember all the boys, like we made the finals, and we thought we were good players. I was with a Premier League club, and we had some quality players in the team. And then when we played France, and we seen Ben Arfa play, like Nasri played, Benzema came on the bench. It was just another level, and that's whenever you actually open your eyes up and realize, hold on a minute, maybe I'm not that good. There's another level to this game. But yeah, you don't see until you see these guys playing in the Champions League, playing in the Premier League, playing in La Liga, whatever it is on TV. But then whenever you actually do play them at a younger age, you can realize, oh my God, that's just a completely another level in Spain, France, and I guess that's what we're trying to do in Northern Ireland in terms of youth development. But again, it's not just technical; it's everything, intelligence. It's just you're thrown into the deep end against these guys, but it's a great experience, and you can learn a lot from them. And
Northern Ireland continues to produce so many good players. At your age group, I'm thinking when you were going over to Rangers, must have been like Stephen Davis, Chris Brunt, maybe that the right ballpark sort of guys that were there?
Yeah, they were older than me, but it was always me, Stephen Davis, Chris Brunt. The three of us would have flown over together. And then you had the younger boys, Robert Gard, Chris Casement, Trevor Carson, Michael Carville. They were the younger boys that would have went over together. But there's many times I would have went over with just me and Chris Brunt maybe, and we had to share double bed. Or went over with Davo and having to share a double bed. Depending, they used to put us in the Sherbrooke Castle Hotel, so it just depended what room they gave you. But again, Chris ended up going to I think it was Middlesbrough he went to, and Davo ended up going to Aston Villa, and then eventually I went to Portsmouth because around that time Dick Advocat was the manager of Rangers, and then he left, and the youth system and all the coaches, they were all filled, they were all Dutch people, and then there was a big they're going through a big transition, and then that's when the three of us ended up signing for another team. Mine would have been a couple of years later, but no, I remember especially going over with Stephen Davis, and I was probably the same size as him, and he was 3 years older than me, 2 or 3 years older than me. But I used to get to watch some of his sessions, and he could get to watch some of mine. And I just remember one of the indoor sessions, and he's just taking the piss. He was class. Joe Kincaid used to teach us all the different tricks, the step overs, the Cruyff turns, and Evo was just pulling them out left, right, and centre. Because he was small, he had that agility to get away from players. And I just remember whenever he was, I think it was 15, I was sitting outside the room for about 3 hours. We were trying to get him to sign a contract. And that's whenever he was in talks with Rangers and Aston Villa. And he ended up going to Aston Villa. Now he's back at Rangers and still playing as if he's 20.
That's amazing, isn't it? And look at what he's just achieved as well, winning the league with them. And, you know, Stephen Gerrard as his manager, it's the stuff of dreams for Stephen, and so pleased for him, as I'm sure you are too. When you were at that stage in your career and you're seeing, obviously, his ability, but you're seeing him get signed and some of the other guys moving on, is that an uncertain time for a young person? Is it kind of, I don't know, a bit scary, the make or break years?
You actually don't even think about it. It doesn't feel like make or break whenever you're that age. Whenever I look back on it, I remember before I went to Portsmouth, Rangers were going through, again, the transition with the coaches, and I always wanted to sign for Rangers. Whenever I was younger, Arsenal wanted me over in trial, and even Manchester United. I'm a Manchester United fan as well. And I just wanted to be at Rangers because I knew all the players. I actually still speak to some of the players now, and from such a young age. And some of them are actually coaches in the youth program at Rangers. But I just wanted. They were sponsored by Nike, and I get phone Nike, and they'd send me a bunch of Nike stuff to my house. So at a young age, when you're 12, 13, it was amazing. And I always wanted to stay with Rangers, but Ryan McCann, Grant McCann's brother, Ryan obviously played for Crusaders and stuff. He was at Rangers. He was already in the youth team at that time. And he's from Sandy Row as well. And when it was around that stage, his dad, my dad, some advice and say, look, all the Dutch guys are in. They want all these Dutch kids. The local lads are not getting a chance. It might be best to move on. So that's whenever I actually went from St Andrews to sign for Lisburn Youth because the Lisburn League was much better than the South Belfast League that we were in at the time. And that was 15. I needed to really push on. And then it was Portsmouth Scout, the first game. He says, do you want to go over? And my dad asked me, and I just, for whatever reason, I said yes. I said no to Arsenal and Newcastle and Man United and things, and then Portsmouth asked me, and I'm like, okay, let's go. But it was just all timing. It could have been any team at that stage, and because Rangers were going through the transition, Ram McCann's dad sort of gave my dad some advice, saying, look, it might be best if he goes to another team because he's going to go there and there are a bunch of Dutch kids in, and he's not going to get a look in because what I'm hearing, these Dutch kids are another level. And that's when it came. I ended up going to Port instead of Rangers. But yeah, you don't really look at it make or break years. I remember Philip Mitchell was the Linfield scout, and he called me and he says, look, I want to sign you for Linfield. And I never really had it in me I wanted to go abroad or across the water, basically. And I always wanted to play for Linfield, but at that age, I'm like, hey, I want to go over and play in Premier League or Scottish Premier League and then come home and finish my career at Linfield. That's a lot of my friends would even thought like that. But again, you don't realise the make or break at that age. You don't even think about it. You just play and hopefully you get a chance somewhere. But I think it's a lot different then. It was a lot different then than it is now. There's a better structure in place. You've got the academies there, the Linfield academies, and Larne Academy now, and it's growing, which is excellent. So now there's a better structure, there's a better understanding of whenever to basically to take care of the players. Because I remember going over to Portsmouth on a plane, landed there, straight into pre-season. You're doing double sessions every day. You're knackered, and then the guy's like, okay, you have to go and set up a bank account. And you're like, you've never had to have a bank account before. You've never had to make your lunch before, on a Sunday, the day after a game. So all that was new. So yeah, it was just simple things like that, and managing money as well when you're 16. But again, I didn't really look at it as make or break. Until I guess maybe 26, 27, when you're sort of halfway through your career and you're like, start to look back slightly, and that's when you realise, whoa, you do need a lot of luck in this game. And it's all about timing as well. Because yeah, like my career could have been completely different to what it is now in timing. I was to play the last two Premier League games for Portsmouth against Wigan and West Brom, and the day before the game, one of the first teamers hit me a tackle and twisted my ankle. I wasn't able to play it, and I was flying at the time, so that would have put me in the shot window. You know, playing in the Premier League, making your debut, playing 2 games, and you know, if you have 2 excellent games, you're in the shot window, and you're like, oh, you're a big prospect. But the timing was I get injured the day before, and I didn't get that opportunity. And then a year later, I was actually flying then, and a year later, I found myself back in the Irish League playing. So in terms of make or break, you do understand whenever you're 19 or 20, but whenever you're 15, 16, you don't really look at it.
It's incredible, just the small margins which can completely change the direction of a career. And things have worked out really well for you, it has to be said, Daryl. But that time when you think you're getting into the Portsmouth team, you're going to get a bit of a chance, and the injury comes, you must have been devastated. Yeah,
I was, because I was flying at the time. You know, I was fit, I was sharp, I was scoring goals for the reserves. You know, I was just doing really well, and manager at the time was Alan Perrin. He was a French guy. You know, so the first team, they stayed up, they were safe, and there was 2 games left. And he phoned the reserve manager and said, look, send me over your best player. He's going to play tomorrow. And I get sent over. Like I just done my warm-up and then sent over and straight into a game of possession. And then 15 minutes later, I just done my ankle. But the manager says to me, look, what position do you play? He didn't even know what position I played, because they didn't know. He didn't know what player was being sent over, even though he was aware of the reserves and all that. And I says, oh, I can play centre midfield or like an attacking midfield. He says, okay, you're playing like as a number 10, you would say now. Basically back then you would have said playing in the hole.
Yeah.
And I was, oh, brilliant. And then 15 minutes later, ankle done. He phoned the reserve manager, send me over your next player. So sent over James Keane. He was our number 9 striker. He plays the last 2 games of the season, does quite well. And then all of a sudden he goes on loan to a team in Sweden, plays a couple of games for them, and does quite well as well, because their season has just started and he's coming to the end, but he was really fit. And Elfsborg in Sweden, they were the top team. They buy him off Portsmouth. I think it was €350,000. And it just so happened that the time he signed, Linfield drew Elfsborg. A year later, Linfield drew Elfsborg, and I had signed for Glentoran, so I was in Belfast. So I met him in Castle Court, and I says, what was the deal that you got? And he just said, yeah, it was 350,000 signing on fee. And I'm like, that's what you got? He says, yeah, after tax. So I'm like, wow. So that's it, in terms of wages and stuff. But he was like, as soon as I got there was €350,000 in my bank account. That was the first day he got there. You know, so that's obviously it'll be a lot more now, because it's the money's sky high. But in terms of he played in Sweden for years, he played in South Africa, he was back on loan at Portsmouth whenever they were in League One and stuff. You know, but that's a fine margins. If you get your little break in the first team, it can make all the difference. And sometimes you don't get it. My instance was because I got a bad injury. You know, because I was with Northern Ireland under 19s at the time, and I was scoring goals for them. I just scored 4 against Serbia, scored against Belgium. You know, so I was in a great form, and that's whenever I just got a little bit of bad luck. And that's what they say. You just need the rub of the green sometimes. It happens to so many players. And that's why a lot of players are like, I can't understand how this guy never made it, because he was brilliant. But it could be he got a little bit of bad luck, or he might have had a bad attitude. You know, but again, there's so many variables and things that can make or break players.
And you look at it as well, so things unfortunately haven't worked out at Portsmouth. You'd be thinking with, how well you've been doing before the injury, you'd get another chance in England, and you had some trials, didn't you? Were you with Stoke, Tony Pulis?
Yeah, I went up to Stoke. It was actually from that injury. The next year was like I couldn't. Everything just went bad for me. Basically, I went up to Stoke. And I remember the boots were away. The second time this happened, it was the player reserve game. When I went on loan to Bournemouth, it was the player reserve game, and my boots were in the bag. So I couldn't get my boots to go to Bournemouth. I had to go that day. My boots were away up to Villa Park. And then the next time they says you're going up to Stoke, Tony Pulis wants to look at you for a couple of weeks. So my boots were away in the bag again. And believe it or not, I actually took Andy Cole's boots. Andy Cole was at Portsmouth, and he was the only same size as me. I went into the boot room, and he had a pair of total 90s, and I'm like, I need to take these, because he had about 10 pairs. So I took a pair of his boots and went up to Stoke, doing really well up there. And, Stoke were chasing promotion. And Tony Pulis basically says to me, there was 2 games left, I think. He says, look, if we get promoted, I'm not going to sign you, because I'm going to get £80 million or whatever it was to sign players. So if we stay in the championship, then I'll sign you, because I'll be able to give you a run out. And Robert Garrett was at Stoke at the time. Robert was a year younger, so he had a year left in his contract. And then Stoke got promoted. So then I couldn't sign. Tony Pulis were like, there's no point, because I want you for the first team. I don't want you playing in the reserves all the year. And I was only 20 at the time, so I was like, just sign me and I'll play in the reserves, and hopefully you get relegated the following year. It didn't happen. Then I went to, I flew home, went on holiday, and then my agent called me and says, look, Luton Town want you over for a trial. Kevin Blackwell's a manager. So I flew over to Luton, done a week there. They were going to Cyprus. The first team were going to Cyprus. And they took me to Cyprus, and on the way home, on the plane, Kevin Blackwell calls me up on the plane, and he says, look, I'm going to give you a 2-year contract. I think you've been fantastic. I was like, oh, brilliant. And then the next day, we actually had another pre-season game, and Don Hutchison was there. Mm-hmm. He was playing centre midfield with Don Hutchison. And then after the game, the manager called me over and says, look, I can't sign you. The club's getting into administration. I'm leaving today. I want to wish you all the best. And then that was it. I was like, okay, can the club book me a flight? He says, no, everything's frozen. All the assets and bank accounts all frozen. They can't do anything.
That's wild.
And it was actually the week before that Dario O'Grady wanted me up at Crewe, and he says, look, Luton want me to go to Cyprus with him. And he says, well, come up here and I'll sign you. So I took a chance going to Luton, because I was flying. I was probably one of the best players in training and in the games that we played. So I was quite confident that I was going to get a contract. And then the club goes into administration. I phoned Dario O'Grady and I'm like, look, this is what's happened. He says, sorry, I've just signed someone. I have no spaces left. And then I was like, right, what do I do now? Like, the season's supposed to start in 2 weeks' time. And I was stuck. So I flew back home, and the agent was trying to get stuff in England, and nothing was coming up because everyone's filled up their squads. And then that's whenever it was Tommy Wright was Ballymena manager, gave me a call. Jerry Flynn was a Newry manager, gave me a call. Ronnie McFall, Portadown. And then Alan McDonald at Glentoran. Alan just took over at Glentoran, and he was my under-21s assistant. And obviously me coming from Sandy Road, being a Linfield man. I said, Alan, I can't sing for Glentoran. And he was like, why not? It's only a game of football. And I said, you don't understand. Like, I'll not be able to live in Sandy Road. And obviously, if you know Alan, he's just a complete gentleman. And he was like, no, you'll be fine and all this. So I spoke to a few people, and I remember speaking to Aaron Callaghan, played right back for Ballymena. And I says to Aaron, what do you reckon? He says, well, you can go to Portadown and you can get under the table. go to Newry and they'll give you a few cash under the table. We go to Ballymena and we'll do it right, you know, and there's great facilities. Or you can go to Glentoran and challenge for trophies, you know. And I was like, why did Linfield not want me? But Linfield had Peter Thompson, Glenn Ferguson, McAreevy, Galt, Mulgrew. That's like all the positions I had, and Linfield were like, they were dominating everything. So I actually went up to train with Ballymena, went and trained with Portadown, went and trained with Glentoran, and like I realised that Glentoran, they had the better players, the better standard. In terms of on the pitch, you know, Ballymena were fantastic as well in terms of how they ran things. But I went home to my dad, and he's a big Linfield man, and says, look, what do you think? And he just says, look, the whole reason you play football is to win trophies. That's what you do it for. So he says, I don't mind. He says, if you sign for Glentoran, I'll sit in the away end at the Oval. And he did.
I love that. That's commitment.
And I ended up signing for Glentoran. And I remember Chris Holt worked for the Belfast Telegraph, and he covered, I think he's a Glen man, he covered a lot of it.
Big Glen man.
Yeah, and the back page of the Belfast Telegraph was Sandy Rowe Blue Man signs for Glentoran. So right there and then, Chris threw me under the bus, and I was playing catch up with not just a fan, but some of the players, die-hard players, Colin Nixon, Paul Lehman, you know, Jason Hill, Glentoran die-hard, even the coach Scott Young, playing catch up right away. But again, for me, I'm not the people that know me. I honestly don't care about what religion you are, what colour you are, what your opinions are. You know, we can have a little debate about things, and you have your say, we have our say, but let's work together to make things better. I've always been like that. You know, and it didn't mean that whenever I went to Glentoran, I'm not going to give 100% against Linfield, because I did, and I scored goals against Linfield. And I just wanted to win trophies, and I did with Glentoran. The players welcomed me. I had to fight my way into the team. I had to do well, and we did. And we had a fantastic team with Gary Hamilton, Halliday up front, with fantastic back four: Sean Ward, Paul Lehman, Jason Hill, Colin Nixon, Philip Simpson was back up as well, and a brilliant midfield. And we lost by 3 points the first year. Linfield won it, and in the second year, we ended up winning the league. I think it was the second year, third year. The second year it was.
Second year.
But yeah, and then Alan left. Scotty took over, and we didn't do well that year. And I ended up going to Linfield. But by that stage, there was space at Linfield. Glenn Ferguson retired. McAreevy retired, you know, so there was, and plus I was doing well at Glentoran, you know. But again, it was, people are like, oh, that's a tough move to make, and it's not if you have the view of, you know, everyone can work together at some point. Because growing up in a divided city, you know, had Protestants and Catholics, and then you go to England. You went to England, and people call me Paddy or Irish, and I'm like, no, I'm British, and that's the few. But they didn't care, because you were from Northern Ireland, you were Irish. It didn't matter. So it was like, there's no point in me fighting this. And I went over with Mark Wilson. Mark Wilson ended up playing for Republic of Ireland, and he's from Achigallan, down in Lurgan. And the two of us became good friends there, and you know, we'd watch a Rangers and Celtic games. I'd wear my Rangers shirt, and he'd wear a Celtic shirt, but then you just realise that at the end of the day, the most important thing is family and friends. You know, why would you sacrifice family and friends over someone else's agenda, so to speak, unless you're really die hard into it? You know, you can look at America over the last few months. You see the die hard people with Donald Trump, and they've been fed conspiracies and lies, and they take it to another level, you know. And and all these people some of them have great jobs, and they're getting fired, and the families, and then all of a sudden their life spirals out of control. But that's looking at it deeply. But in terms of football back home, you know, I love my time at Glentoran under Alan McDonald. Alan was fantastic with me, and he really got me settled again, coming back from England. Because he said to me now, he said, look, I've played in England and I've took a couple of games here, but don't think it's easy here because you don't get that much time on the ball. And you didn't. I remember thinking, oh, first training session is going to be easy. I couldn't get the ball off Gary Hamilton. I thought, oh, I'm just going to take it off him. I couldn't get it off him. And then I realised that, hey, the standard's a little bit better here. And then, yeah, we won the Antrim Shields, we won the League Cup. The league got to the final of the Untitled Cup against Cork. But yeah, for me, it was a very enjoyable time at Glentoran. Even though it didn't end it well by going to Linfield. But again, that was my decision. I always wanted to play for Linfield as a kid, and it was a boyhood dream. It was a choice between signing for Linfield or Glentoran. It was a no-brainer for me. But I did give 100% to Glentoran, and I always did, and I always have for every team that I've played for, regardless of who it is.
Do you think the Setanta Cup or something like that would be valuable to bring back maybe for the Irish League teams? You know, you look back to those finals, and Kyle Neal, what a free kick that was. You'll obviously claim the assist for the nice wee roll-off for him.
You didn't get assists back then, but if you started counting assists, I think Kyle might have scored about 7 free kicks like that year, so I would have got 7 assists on top. All I done was roll it with the sole of my foot, and he hit it with the hammer of his left foot. But yeah, we were unlucky and unfortunate we had to go down there and play them in Cork, the furthest place away for us. But the southern teams were always stronger than us. You know, we had St. Pat's in our group, and like they were fantastic, and we drew 3-3 away, but we were actually 3-1 up, and Elliot Marsh, one of our players, goes down. One of their players went down injured, and Elliot throws it out, you know, to get him treatment. But they never threw it back to us. They took a long throw into the box and scored from it, 3-2, and then we were complaining, ended up 3-3. And then when we got them at the Oval, we beat them 1-0. I scored after 6 minutes, I think, and we beat them 1-0. So that was very deserved for us. I was looking
at that because you had that group format as well, and obviously Linfield were in your group, and it was the late Mark Farron scored a hat-trick against Linfield in the night that you got the goal, and those two events combining got you through.
Yeah, you know, and St. Pat's had Keith Fahey playing for them in midfield. I was on the UFA license with Keith. I was paired up with him, and he obviously didn't remember me, but he ended up going to Birmingham and stuff after, and you know, Keith was class. I think they had Joseph Indo was there, and Keith I was at Sligo, and they were like, he's the best player ever for Sligo. And you watch some of the videos and stuff. But we were not expected to beat St. Pat's. We were expected to get battered by St. Pat's. But again, we had good players, and Alan was an excellent coach, and he set us up well. So when we went down there, and we should actually scored down there as well, but we should actually beat them only for the last few minutes. They had a bit of gamesmanship, and then we beat them at the Oval. But again, we had Linfield, Derry, St. Pat's, and then the other groups, Cork. Even the semi-final, we played, I think it was Drogheda, was it?
Yeah, Drogheda,
yeah. JC Hill scores after 4 minutes. It was like a little scuffy goal.
They all count.
They all count. We couldn't get over half the rest of the game. They missed a penalty, and the final whistle went. I remember Gary Hamilton. He ended up going to left wing. He was playing left wing back because we were 1-0 up. We went with 4. He actually made the call. He looked over at Big Mac and says, "Gaffer, I'm going to go 4-5-1. We'll defend the whole game," and we did. And Kevin Keegan played for them, and he missed a penalty. After the game, I just remember, like, we celebrated, but I'm always one that sort of looks outside the box type guy. And I looked around me and all our boys, or some of them were on the ground. And I remember just standing beside Kevin Keegan, and he looked at me and said, "How on earth have you just won that game?" And I just looked at him and said, "I don't care, mate. We're going to the final." And then all of a sudden, all the Glentoran fans stormed the pitch. But again, for me, Drogheda were a much better team than Cork. You know, we had a chance against Cork. If we played Drogheda again, they would have battered us every single game. But actually, I think Cork, I'm not sure if Kevin Doyle or Shane Long or someone like that was playing for them. Or I can't remember, but I would have to, if there's any videos, I would have to look back on them. But yeah, we had a good team. We challenged Linfield every single year until the financial problems came in at Glentoran. And then even whenever I went to Linfield, like Big Davey used to come in with 2 medals. He had 2 medals hanging on a suit. So when he wore a suit, he had his medals out, you knew he's in a serious mood today. And he said to me, "This is one of the medals. You have the gold one of it." And I didn't have a clue. He says, "That one hurts me the most." The year we won the league with Glentoran. Because, you know, Big Davey's just a purebred winner.
Winner through and through.
And I experienced it when I went there. And but yeah, it was a great time there. And I think this Untitled Cup, if you could bring something like that back, because even playing for Sligo, I would have loved to have played. We played, Cliftonville came down for a pre-season game. You know, and I was like, this would be great to play in another tournament. Just to challenge the North against the South again. Because the South were always better then, but now it's a lot different. You know, obviously Dundalk and Shamrock Rovers are far apart, in my opinion, to any team in Southern Ireland and Northern Ireland. Just by playing against them, and even you seen Dundalk playing Linfield. I think it was last year, and Dundalk just destroyed them on a counter-attack. But yeah, Linfield's going full-time, Crusaders are full-time, Larne are full-time. And you can see the standard. You watch the games on the BBC website, you can see the standard in games just going up a level from what I played in 10 years ago. And I wish we, like back then it was a 4-4-2, get it wide, put it in the channel, cross it into the box. You know, at Glentoran, we had to get it to Hamilton's feet. He had done a bit of magic, got it wide to Kyle Neal, and he had whipped it into Halliday's head, or even into me running late. Linfield were the same. Get it to Spike's feet, he gets it wide, and then they throw it into the box for him and Thompson. And that's the way the game is played.
Yeah.
But I remember sitting it was on the bench one game at Linfield, and me and Robert Garrett, and you know Robert Garrett's a ball player.
Yeah.
And I was like, this would be brilliant if we were allowed one of the midfielders to split the 2 centre backs, drop in, you know, and then have the striker come short and the winger popping inside. You know, I used to see the game like that 10 years ago, and then now you watch Linfield now and you watch Larne now, and they're doing it. And it's very more tactical. But again, it's what it does. It sort of it separates the intelligent players to the, like back then. You know, we had in the league, there was a lot of average players. If you bring them, if they had to go to England, like they would have just been a fish out of water. But whenever they're in the Irish League and they were able to hit these tackles and get tight and win their headers, like they were seen as good players. But now with the league, the way the league's starting to change, like I watched Linfield against Larne a few weeks ago, and it was very, very tactical. And now you can look at it and see it's improving. So what will happen is a lot of players now will have to get a lot more intelligent to keep up with the play. And then once they go to England, they have to step it up a level. You know, because there's some guys that they're back on loan from a couple of clubs in the league. You know, and you wonder why they not playing in the first team over there at the minute.
Yeah.
You know, so a lot of times it could be they're missing home and things. But that's where you have to be a lot more independent as well, and not just coaching the kids at a young level, you got to coach them to be independent as well. Got to coach them to take things into their own hands and don't rely on other people to do it for them, you know, and then just get them into the process to improve themselves each and every single day without them turning up to training and expecting the coach to put something on to make them better. Like that's a gimme. But outside of that, as an individual, what are you doing outside of that? And for me, to go to England or even go to Scotland, you can take your game to another level as long as you put the work in. And the perfect example would be Sturdy Dallas.
Yeah.
You know, how good has Sturdy got over the last 5-6 years? Like, we've watched him for Northern Ireland. Like, we always knew Sturdy's brilliant. You know, and he started off at Coke United, went to Glenavon, Crusaders, goes over. But then you look at him in the Premier League now, and like, he's probably the best versatile player in the league. There's no one better on him in terms of however you say that word.
Versatility.
Versatility, yeah. And he can play anywhere, and that's where I'm trying to get at. Is he's obviously got a fantastic coach in Bielsa, but knowing Sturdy personally, he improves himself and he's humble, you know, and he settled down with his family, and he's got a great family and things, where when he finishes training, he goes home to family. He's not worrying about, you know, is he going out tonight, or whatever it is. And Sturdy's probably done that since he was 20 years of age. And look at the rewards he's getting now. Because you see championship players going up into the Premier League, and there will be a few Leeds players there thinking, oh, they can handle it, and some of them might not. But Sturdy, even this year, has actually gone on another level for Leeds. And whenever he plays a game, he starts at left back, he's playing right wing, and he's playing centre midfield, and he's back at right back. You know, Bielsa can just throw him anywhere. And that's where he's Sturdy's always been very independent himself, humble, and just gets on with things. He focuses on the task at hand, and he's improved every single year in his career. You know, so whenever you get players like that, if Northern Ireland, if we can produce a lot more players like that, like, we'll have a even better senior team in 10 years' time, like, without doubt. Because I even see kids like Charlie Allen, who's at Leeds as well. I've seen some of his highlights at their under 23s there. There's a couple of kids at Rangers. We've got Ethan Gilbreth at Man United. You know, so if there's a lot of quality players, and if you can get them a lot more, as long as they keep improving year in, year out, you know, and all of a sudden the senior team will end up in a World Cup and actually go a little bit far as they used to years ago.
It's funny because, you know, the way they say, oh, if we had 11 of him or whatever, and there's an old chance, you know, dream of a team of whatever. Stuart Dallas is probably the only player that really applies to, because he can literally do anything.
And it just shows you that, as I'm saying, with the way the Irish League has gone, and, you know, a lot of people give the Irish FA a little bit of stick, but I've been through my coaching badges with the Irish FA, and the coach education that they've put in place, and they're still, you know, I speak with Andy Waterworth here and there, and he works in the thick of it. And what they're implementing there is, it's doing so much for the Irish League, because now there's proper structures in place, and we've got players that are starting to play the way the Europeans play. You know, you watch the Charlie Allens and the Ethan Gilbreths at that age, and they're starting to play how, like, a Xavi type player would play, and they're starting to get up with the intelligence. You know, so it's remarkable over the last 10 years, so to speak, from whenever I was there to, you know, how it is now. Obviously, there's still a long way to go, and the game will still evolve. But, you know, if we could produce 11 Sturdy Dallases on the pitch, you know, or 11 Johnny Evans on the pitch in terms of intelligence, and that's where, as a senior team and the whole country, want to get to, where we have 15, 16, 17 players all in the Premier League playing week in, week out. And then that's whenever, the senior team's like, okay, all this hard work, it's been excellent. Because over the years, it's always been a couple here and there in the Premier League, some in the Championship, some in Scotland, League One, League Two, and it's been diversified. And obviously the goal is to get 15, 16, 17 proper senior players in the Premier League playing for the Leicesters, the Leeds, the Chelseas. And can it be done? No problem. Because as a country, we've produced one of the greatest players ever in George Best. So it's the football DNA is in our blood there.
You've named some amazing Irish League forwards just in passing, and they've been teammates of yours as well. There's always that debate about who's the best of all time. Do you have an opinion on that?
In the Irish League?
Yeah.
Oh, it's Glenn Ferguson, without a doubt. I never played with Glenn. He was my favourite player as whenever I was a kid. He was my favourite Linfield player. Big Spike. I remember we played the second Boxing Day game. I think he might have been about 38 at the time. The first Boxing Day game was at the Oval. We won 1-0. First time Glentoran beat Linfield, I think, in 18 years or something on Boxing Day. Michael Halliday scored. A year later, we went to Windsor and they beat us, I think it was 3-0. Spike scored 2, but we had Colin Nixon and Paul Eman back there and 2 unbelievable defenders. I think Colin actually played centre back, I think, that night, and we put Sean Ward to right back just because of Spike. And with all due respect, Colin and Leaper Spike was too much for them on that night in particular. And obviously Spike done it over the years. And I'm sure Paul Eman and Colin would say the same about Spike. But, the Linfield players, they would just look up and hit it in the Spike. Didn't matter what way they hit it. It didn't have to be a good ball. Spike had the strength to hold off, the technique and the touch to kill the ball. And then all of a sudden Linfield were, they're ready to put the ball into the box or it's around the edge of the box for a shot. But without doubt, Glenn Ferguson, was only, I think he was 38 at the time. And I remember playing on that pitch. D. Curran actually scored a smashing goal for Linfield. But actually seeing him at 38, I'm like, wow, imagine seeing him 10 years ago playing against him. But yeah, I would have to go, without doubt, Glenn Ferguson. And for me, second would be Gary Hamilton. Because Gary had a little bit more magic, a little bit more skill than Spike. But Spike was just a force, And I played with Gary every single day in training and seeing the stuff that he could do. And Gary could just turn up one day and if he wanted to score a hat-trick, he could score a hat-trick. But the way Spike was just too forceful for anybody in the league.
Yeah.
It would have had to take, I guess, 2 Winky Murphys to handle him.
That's a scary thought, isn't it? 2 Winky Murphys.
Yeah, it actually would take 2 Winkies to handle Spike, and that's how much powerful Spike was. And not just that, the ball's in the air, cross into the box, and it's coming onto his head. You know where it's going to end up. It's ending up in the back of the net. Because I remember my dad actually told me he went up to New Forest Lane to watch Northern Ireland senior team train. And Glenn Ferguson was called into the senior team. And I was only a kid at the time, and he came home and said, I went up and watched the senior team, and I just so impressed by Glenn Ferguson. He says, we were doing a cross and finishing session. Every header, like a bullet into the back of the net. And then he says even some of the defenders couldn't handle him that much. And had Spike, I guess he had offers to play across the water, and maybe it was due to family reasons or something that he didn't go across. I'm not so sure, but a phenomenal player. And now just a fool. I don't know what he would be worth now. Like if he was playing in the Irish League now,
be a bidding war.
um, it'd be unbelievable if he's in the Irish League now, because even it's a lot more technical, but he was technical, and he, in terms of, like, if they wanted to play off the striker now, it's just a fantastic player. You know, I never played with him, but playing against him, I could just see what he'd done to Colin Nixon and Paul Eman that night, and they were our two leaders. You know, and it was actually scary to see that. But with all due respect to Leaper and Nicky, you know, a few days after training, they were like, we take full onus on that, but we push on. And we did. We pushed on and won the league that year. And with those two leaders, and that's where I started to learn a lot more about resiliency. You know, even though you might get, you know, get embarrassed a few times when you're playing, or you're up against an opponent, and as we say back home, you get your asphalt on the pitch, take the piss out of you. Not to let that hamper your future performances. And that's where I would learn from Nicky and Leaper. You know, it didn't matter if you get beat 10-0 or 1-10-0. You took it into your next game, and you applied the same principles. So, you know, playing with guys like that and against players like that, you know, you can learn a lot.
And they are generals as well. You know, as a young player, being able to be in the same changing room, out in the same pitch as people like Nicky and Leaper, you couldn't wish for any better, could you?
Yeah, and it was only 5 years before that I was a season ticket holder at Linfield and shouting abuse to them. Big Chris Walker would have played as well there at the time, and Halliday played. I know Halliday scored a couple of goals all the time, but you always remembered the players and knew every player in the team. And then, you know, Scott Young, Pete Beattie, the eventually became the head coach, the manager and the assistant in the last year there. And so I spent a few years yelling abuse at them and supporting Winky and Spike, and then all of a sudden I'm in the changing room with Leaper and Nicky and Halliday, and then playing against Winky and Spike, you know. So for me, it was like, I even remember, because I was still friends with a lot of them. Obviously coming from Sandy Row and the bars and stuff, we put on, like, you know, Linfield supporters clubs would have put on like Player of the Years and stuff. So I knew Winky, and even after some games, you know, coming in from Windsor, I remember coming up the tunnel at Windsor, then getting in the corridor, and Linfield had just beat us, and Winky was out at the time, and Winky's giving a bit of banter to some of our players, like shove it up them and have that, and use on that come here and all this here stuff, and Leaper's giving it back to him, you know, just argy bargy type stuff. And I was walking in, and Winky's like, "All right, Daryl, mate, how are you?" You know, for me, it was sort of a conflict of interest. I was stuck between a rock and a hard place. And then I have to go back into the changing room, and obviously Nicky and Leaper and Halliday would have heard Winky say that, and they're like, "Where does your allegiance lie? Where's your loyalty here?" And I had to, like, basically tell the boys, like, this has nothing to do with my history or whatever. I'm here. I'm a Glentoran player, and I want to win trophies, regardless of who it is. And you know, everyone has my respect, and hopefully I have your respect as well. And that's the way it was. And again, like, in terms of Leaper, what a fantastic guy. You know, actually, he was on when I was doing my A license, he was there as well. Mm-hmm. I hadn't seen Leaper in years, and Leaper helped me so much. Just a fantastic, as you said, just a general, just a proper leader. And just to learn from those guys at a young age was fantastic. And I still, till this day, I still think of some of the stuff that we done. Alan McDonald was very more a quiet leader, you know, and you knew he had your back, and you knew that he had the best interests of you before anything. because he knew that if the players performed for him, then the team and the club were going to be fine. And then whenever you move across to Big Davy, it was different. It was, you obviously knew Big Davy loved you, and he protected the life out of every single one of his players, and he still does at Ballymena. But there was more standards there, and you weren't, to drop your standard wasn't acceptable at Linfield. And that was probably the difference between the two clubs, from my experience, without being any disrespect to either or. But there was a standard there, and if you let that standard drop, then like basically you weren't in the team, or you wouldn't have been in the squad. And people would have said it's because Linfield had such a big squad and quality players. But I'm pretty sure Big Davy would have done that, and he would have played a younger player if you dropped your standards. And I guess that's why, like, he's just a pure winner, Big Davy. But I'm trying to think that Alan McDonald would have been like Carlo Ancelotti, a quiet leader. Like, he has a quiet leadership, I've read it. And Big Davy's like Alex Ferguson. That's what the two of them are like. Big Davy could have just shouted one name. He could have yelled your name, and that spoke a full sentence of what happened the prior couple of minutes of the game when you're on the pitch. So Big Davy had that ability, whereas Alan's was more quiet. But with the two of them, you know, it was two different styles of leadership, but like, unbelievable to play under two of them. And not just that, they had two assistant managers. They had assistant manager, Jordy Neal at Glentoran, and Brian McLaughlin, who's still there. Like, they were unbelievable as well. So it was a team thing. But again, whenever I'm 34 now, I look back on it now, and like, I'm captain of the team I'm with now, Valor. One of the older boys, I think the youngest might be 4 years younger than me. And now the younger boys are asking me for advice, and you know, and I have to recollect what I learned from the Lehmans, the Winky Murphys, you know, these guys, and what I learned from them to pass it on to the younger generation, the Canadian kids here, you know, and you have to be a little bit more subtle nowadays.
Well, I was going to say that, Daryl, because it must be some of the I'm not looking at you directly with this, but you know, some of the language, some of the aggression, some of the ways that we would just consider normal in a game of football, whether it was Armature League, whatever. I think if you take that out to Canada, they're probably thinking, what have I done to you?
That's exactly what it is. And it was actually my wife, I was speaking to her last week, and she's a manager in one of her stores, and she's the same. You know, you'll crack a joke, you know, we can talk shit about each other, and it's a joke, but they take it literally. And it actually has got me in trouble a few times here. It's got me in trouble with a previous owner here. And thankfully, that the head coach that me and Albert had in Edmonton, he was from Scotland. So he understood it all. You know, you would do a joke on someone and they would think that you don't like them. Or even on the pitch, like, remember Albert? Albert's basically his saying. He used to say, "Hey you, come on to FUCK."
Yeah.
whenever he shouted it to me, I knew, like, I need to get going here. Canadian players, they come in at half time and go to Albert, "What's your problem with me? What have I done on you?" And Albert scratching his head, like, and I'm scratching my head. So we had, like, Albert was the captain at Edmonton, and then I would have been the vice. And we had to basically spell it out for the players and get that banter, get that looseness within the boys. And it was amazing that some of the boys, whenever they actually did come out of their shell and became a little bit more extroverted, without worrying, because here it's you have to be careful what you say.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still, even to me now, it's still like that with the club. And thankfully my coach here, he's from England. So he understands the Northern Irish way, and I can get away with a few things, you know, whenever I put it straight to people and let them know where I stand, and you have to let me know where you stand and then move on, you know. But like we had to put it to him, and we had a big American goalkeeper, you know, and he was the best keeper in the league at Edmonton, and his dad was in the military. You know, if he says he'll pick you up at 12 o'clock, he was outside your house at 11:45. If you came out at 11:46 thinking you're early because you've seen him outside, he would say, you're late. And he was always 15 minutes early every time, no matter what it is. So he was very serious and angry, you know, big guy like. And then eventually me and Albert sort of, like, we took him out for a few drinks and broke him down slightly and got him into the banter way. And unbelievable. He understood it, how to basically be free, so to speak, the way we are back home. Because the only way back home is, you only know when someone has a problem with you is whenever they've already headbutted you or punched you. You know, but before that, it's, you can say what you want to each other and they'll not really take it personal.
Exactly. So, we love a good slagging session, don't we, really? And our best mates, that's how we talk to each other. I even, going back to being out in Canada at my friend's wedding, and he lives out there now, and me and one of the boys from here were, you know, just giving each other a wee touch, and there were people ready to break us up, and I thought, there's no fight here.
I remember when we first got here, and we'd have went for dinner with some of the staff members at the club, you know, and they were with their husbands and wives type dinner, and me and Tina would have been speaking to each other, or me and Albert and Alison, his wife, and you know, you could sense this sort of friction in the room. And people, the Canadians, were looking at us, and they thought that we were having an argument. And then we actually says, no, this is not an argument. This is how we speak to each other. So even till this day, me and my wife, like, sometimes whenever I pick her up from work and go home, we still have to try and talk. Even the other day, she's like, you know, I think I'm being too nice to some of the people, because, you know, she's like, okay, I'm putting you on truck. You got to go out the back and help lift the truck, because she works in retail. She's a manager in one of the retail stores. And they're like, she actually said the other day that one of the girls said to her, like, do you not like me? Like, I'm on truck. I'm never on truck. And she's saying to me, I'm the manager, just go and do it.
Yeah.
You know, it's not personal. And that's the way Canadians, that's the way to think. You know, it's not a bad thing, or it's not us against you type thing, but it's just the way they think. And everyone's a little bit different, you know. But the first thing I said, we had a leadership meeting last year at Valor, and you had the manager and the leaders of the group, and the first thing I said was, guys, like, this is competitive football. It's, you know, it's a men we're in the men's professional league here, you know. So if someone says something to you, do not take it personal. Understand that if someone tells you to get your finger out and get a move on because you're not doing it, they're actually helping you, because they have seen that you've made a little mistake. Maybe you haven't seen it, but don't take it personal. It's just the way footballers talk to each other. Hey, get the finger out, or tuck inside, or if someone lost their marker, you have a go at them for losing their marker. If the keeper doesn't come to take a cross, you let the keeper know, come and take it. You know, but don't take it personal. So that's from the first year. The first year I wasn't here, obviously, 2019, to last year, you know, speaking with the manager and the assistant and a couple of players that were, you know, it's been an improvement, and hopefully we'll improve it this year as well in terms of the culture, and understanding that, you know, if you don't get selected, don't be beating yourself up about it and feeling bad. If someone, like, if you're not scoring goals, if you're a striker and you're not scoring a couple of goals, and you see an article saying why is a striker not scoring, don't be reading into it and thinking that you're a bad player. just be humble and as a team we'll work together and help each other through it. So that's what we were trying to build here. And that's what we did build at Edmonton. Obviously, me and Albert would have been in the heart of it with a couple of other players and the manager as well. And it takes time to do. And we eventually done it at Edmonton because the third year we were there, they do projections, who's going to win the league, who's going to finish bottom. Obviously, there's no promotion relegation. There was 12 teams and our projections were we're going to finish 10th, 11th, maybe even last. That's where they were projecting Edmonton. But as the season went on, we finished third in the spring season, third in the fall season. Like there's 2 seasons and then third overall. We got to the semi-final, lost 1-0, last 10 minutes. And I remember we were sort of a punch bag for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. Even the ball would go out for a throw-in and it's for them, and a couple of our Canadian players would have picked the ball up and give it back to them. And we'd say, no, you pick that ball up and throw it 5 yards the other way so they can't take a quick throw-in. Or, you got to take a foul for the team. You might have to take a booking. We're like, this is taking one for the team. A tactical foul, it's known as now. So we were getting all that stuff into them. And even if you're up against an opponent, just winding them up, saying something stupid about him. Me and Albert were at it all the time, from corners. Remember we played the Whitecaps and they were expected to beat us. And obviously Albert's second name is Watson. And the Whitecaps have a centre-back. He's called Waston. And he doesn't even speak English. So it's Waston on the back of his shirt. And I went, big man, Kitman's taking a piss out of you. You don't have a clue what I was on about. And our boys and a couple of Whitecaps players are looking at me. I says, look, they've spelt his name wrong. And they're like, no, that's how you say it. And I says, Albert, turn round. Albert turns around. I says, that's how you spell it. And they're like, no, it's Waston. I says, yeah, they spelled it wrong, Watson. And they just couldn't really get the banter. So the big guys, like Albert says, what's this here? So Albert would walk over and give a little elbow in to him to get a reaction out of him. And the big guy's like, hey, what's your problem? What's this and all? So we were trying to get that into our players, So you look at fighters in terms of Conor McGregor, Mike Tyson, some of the best fighters in the world, and they could know they're going to have an opponent just by looking in his eye before the fight. And that's what we used to tell our players. When you're in the tunnel, turn around. When you're lined up, turn around and look at him until he actually looks at you. And then stay there until he takes his eye off you. I'm like, that's you. He's like, why is he looking at me like that for? And we got that throughout all our players. And we didn't have the best players compared to other teams. We would have played New York Cosmos and we wouldn't get the ball off them for 90 minutes. But that season, New York Cosmos, they played free-flowing football, and that as that season went on, and we were, I don't even know if we lost at home that year. They started, when we got the ball, they would have dropped off and got their shape, and they never done that. So then we realised, me and Albert would get it to the players and say, look, that's them and showing us the respect that we deserve. As soon as we get the ball and they're dropping off, mm-hmm. that shows that they're scared of us. So take it to them. And as the season went on, we get stronger and stronger, and made the playoffs, which we weren't expected to do. So I'm trying to sort of implement that here with Valor, because again, I guess Forge are the strongest team. Calgary, Pacific, they've been the dominant over the last 2 years, so to speak, and even last year Halifax got improved, and we improved as well. But again, it's getting to know them. But whenever it's 11-11 on the pitch, don't worry about what's going on outside the pitch. If you can look your man in the eye, you never know. And even whenever I was at Sligo, I remember last year or 2 years ago we played Shamrock Rovers, and Jack Byrne was playing for Shamrock Rovers. Best player in the league. The first game we played them, we actually beat them 2-1. I scored a screamer. and he played, and he was fantastic. And I didn't really know of him, but until I actually played against him, and I was like, he's brilliant. And then the next game, that game, their striker, actually, it was 1-1, and their striker said, "Jack, you better win us that game." But what he was doing, he was popping in behind me and Dave Colley in the midfield, and he was giving us problems, because we knew if he gets the ball in there and he gets turned, like, he's a genius on the ball. He'll score, set it up. And we didn't want him to get the ball in there. So, me being a little bit shrewd, I went, he doesn't want the ball, to their striker, while Jack Byrne was there. And the striker was like, "What are you talking?" Like, looked at me as if to say, "What are you talking about?" I said, "He's hiding in behind me. He keeps staying behind me and Colley." Yeah, I said, "I heard he's the best player in the league, but he's hiding in behind me." So what does Jack Byrne do? Obviously, Jack's still young. He starts coming in front of us. So me and Dave Colley's like, "Happy days." Happy days. And I can see him. But he ended up setting up a goal, or setting up a move from there. But it made us happy. It made us, we knew where he was, and he wasn't as a threat. And in the next game, we played them away. They destroyed us. Then we played them at home. And my mate and his wife came down from Belfast to watch the game, and they sat right up above the tunnel, and he shouted down, "Daryl, look who's beside me." And he's sitting beside Mick McCarthy. And Mick McCarthy's a Republic manager at the time. And he says, he's here to watch Jack Byrne for Shamrock, because my mate, he's from the Shankill. He doesn't care who's listening to it. So he's like, he's here to watch Jack Byrne. And Mick McCarthy's looking at him as if to say, "What are you at?" So, shake of hands, game's kicked off. About a minute in, I'm beside Jack Byrne, and I says, "How are you, Jack? How's things?" He's like, "All good, buddy, all good." I says, you know Mick's here watching you tonight?" Because he hadn't been called in the senior team yet. He's like, "I think it's a second game he's up watching." I says, "You may play well, don't be making any bad passes tonight." You know, or I says, "Northern Ireland will be knocking on the door for you instead. I don't want that." And he was like, "Aye." So his first ball, he passes it, and the pitch is wet, and the ball, he hits it, and the left back just doesn't. The left back should have been on his bike, but he wasn't. And the ball skidded out. I said, "Jack, don't be doing that again." And again, the next ball he plays a bad pass. I just looked. He actually looked at me, and I went, "Oh, Big Mick's going to be leaving at half time." And then it was like halfway through the first half, game's 0-0, not much happening, and Dave Colley took the ball off him, and I think he set up a goal, or almost set up a goal. And I said, "Jack, Big Mick will be leaving at half time." But see the rest of that game, for being the best player in the pitch, he was probably the most underperforming player on that night. And then after the game, I actually over and said, "Jack, don't worry about it. You're the best player in the league." And he got called into the senior team. But that's what I'm trying to bring into the Canadian boys here, that, you know, there's another side. Alex Ferguson used to do it, 9 games. Yeah. There's another side to it. As long as you're fair with it and not being like harsh or anything on it. Because you know what the Irish League's like. Everyone talks crap to each other. And that's what I'm trying to get to our players here. Individually as well, because, you know, we have a big centre back. He's a gentleman, quality on the ball, and, you know, if he looks at you, he's scary, but he's a real gentleman. And I would say to him, just like look at him as if you're going to punch them. You're not just to rattle him slightly, because once you have the striker, he'll not want to go near you. Go to the other side, and then the other centre back, get him to do the same, and then you've thrown him off his game slightly. You know, you've intimidated him. And that's why, like, in terms of football, people don't really look at that side of the game. Because Alex Ferguson was up to his eyeballs doing it. You know, he's like us here with his watch, Fergie time, his interviews. You know, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer complained about Chelsea the other week there, putting the Harry Maguire thing sort of challenge on Aspilicueta they put on their website before the game. And then during the game, United never got a penalty. The handball on, you know, some people say it's handball, it's penalty. For me, it's a stupid rule.
Yeah.
Alexander Solskjaer, he's like, oh, it's because they put it out. Solskjaer played under Fergie. He knows all the tricks in the book. Mourinho's at it. You know, so I'm trying to tell the guys here, Canada don't do that here. We've got a head start. If we can do this, they're not going to know. And for me, like, Albert was absolutely brilliant at it. Because we would have the Canadians, even a couple of the Jamaican boys, like one of the Jamaican boys used to think me and Albert were crazy. They're like, you two are not right in the head. But it was all an act, you know, just to get an upper hand on your opponent on the pitch. And then afterwards, it's like, you know what, we'll buy them a beer. That's what they do in the Irish League. Kick a life out of each other, and then you go for a beer afterwards.
I think they called you the Belfast brothers, didn't they? Albert was telling me a story about how you maybe helped your manager out in one game where you playing against Minnesota and they were getting the better of you in the first half. And I think at Edmonton it was a bit rigid in terms of the formation. You were playing against a 4-3-3, and was it either you or Albert said, let's turn this into a 4-2-3-1 and we'll get back into this game? Ever a wee bit of that going on?
There's a lot of that going on. Our managers, Colin Miller, like we love them to bits. Very strong-headed, you know, old school, 4-4-2. That's it. You know, I guess Colin would maybe look back on it now and see how the game's sort of evolved, where tactics and formations and systems do matter to a point. Obviously, it's not the be-all, end-all, but it does matter, because if you're playing centre midfield and it's 3 against 2 in there, and you say your coach has told your strikers to stay high and your wingers to stay wide, and there's too much space, so the 3 in there is destroying the 2 of you. You know, you need help. You need to drop a striker in, or you need to get your wingers tucked inside, or you need your back 4 to push up to make it a little bit tighter. You know, but you gotta sort of sacrifice one thing to help something else. Mm-hmm. And again, it's all about timing and doing it. You know, so like, we played Minnesota. They were quality. They would have been probably one of the best teams in the league. And possession based, they would have 65-70% against us every time. And, you know, I think it would have been one of the first games, and I was in the midfield. And I just remember I hit I think I hit their captain a tackle. And it sort of fired up our manager slightly. He was like, yeah, let's get going here. And, you know, because it wasn't like me, they hit the hard tackles. It was always Albert, or we had another boy there, Richie Jones was at Man United. He would have went in hard, you know. But if you seen one of your, I guess I would have been one of the nicer players, you know, a technical type player. If you see one of those guys hitting a tackle, you know, it gives everyone a lift. But again, I remember me and Albert, we ended up discussing it. He says, look, we need to change this slightly. I think I was playing a striker, and I said, I'll drop into midfield, and we dropped in. I think we won the game. And that was the first time that sort of got the ball rolling. And a light bulb came on me and Albert's head to say, you know what? You see, when we're on the pitch as players, we have the power to change things slightly. You know, as long as it's not going against the manager. Because a 4-4-2, 4-2-3-1, all it is your wingers tucking inside slightly and one of your strikers dropping in as number 10 to help out the midfield. And from then on, we started to, especially at half time, we would change slightly, you know, change tactics.
How did you pass that on? Because obviously your manager's about as well, and he just know 4-4-2, that's all there is. So is it like we nudges and, you know, you're going to do this now, or how does it work?
Oh, it was whenever we get back onto the pitch, ready to start the second half, you know, we call each other over. You know, as if, you know, Celtic would go into a huddle and do their huddle, but we just called each other over to have a chat, and it was there. And we sort of had our own type system. We would say to the goalkeeper, what do you see in front of you? What's what we're trying to do? And he would give the back, what he sees, he would give the back 4, you know, some advice. Mm-hmm. And Albert, what do you see? And he would give the midfield and the fullbacks advice. And then we might have asked one of the fullbacks, Adam Eckersley, came through at Man United. We signed him from Hearts, I think. We would ask him because he was very smart as well. And then he was given the wingers. And then I was in the midfield. They would have asked me, and then we would have went to the striker, and we asked the striker, like, how can we help you? What do you need? And then from there, honestly, it only took a minute to get that across to each other. And then that's when we realised that, all right, a right back's getting 2v1. Okay, in that instance, our holding midfielder, come you over and protect him slightly, because we had a good right winger. We don't want him chasing all the way back. His strength was, breaking forward as a counter attack, because he was quick and he had a good delivery as well. So sometimes we would have said, you track back, and then someone might have said, no, have the midfielder go across, let him stay out. But on the left side, the left midfielder, he was maybe a little bit fitter than the right midfielder, so we were able to say, just you track back in that instance. And then we would see it as it goes on. But, obviously you never go against the manager, but we were just putting a little stamp in the game in the second halves just to help ourselves out at times, because we were always the underdogs against Minnesota, against Tampa, against Cosmos, Miami. And, we know that every coach doesn't know all the answers and doesn't have all the solutions to everything. So that's where we were like, okay, it wasn't to go against the coach. It was how can we help ourselves and give ourselves a better chance on the pitch? Without saying we can't just stick to a 4-4-2, or we can't just stick to a 4-5-1, whatever it was we were set up that day. And as players, we actually started to get a little bit more experienced and better at it, So it was actually what we took from the manager, we sort of brought that onto the pitch. And our manager, in terms of defensive tactics, he was fantastic. In 4 years, we had 2 goalkeepers to get the Golden Glove, the most clean sheets in the year. We had Albert in defence with another. The first year we had the Scottish guy, David Proctor, him and Albert, great relationship. And then Prox went back to Scotland, and we had a guy from Senegal who built up a good relationship with Albert. And we had a good goalkeeper, so along with their fullback. So we were very solid there. The only piece missing was the attacking side. And that's where I would have come into it, because I see the attacking side a lot better than the defensive side of the game. Just to help out the players and myself as well, because I would have been the top goal scorer most years, coming from midfield as well. But I would always think that, okay, if our striker's not the top goal scorer, where else can we get goals from? I would look at myself, look at other players who can chip in with the goals, just all different types of things. But yeah, I remember we done it, and the manager done an interview, and he was like, for whatever reason, we're always better in the second half. All the boys started laughing and stuff, and he didn't know, but it wasn't because it wasn't work. Well, because it was just to help ourselves out. That's all we used to do it.
I love that.
Yeah, and then whenever at the end of the year, I remember speaking with the manager in the meeting, and I sort of says, like, as the players, we sort of took it upon ourselves to do this type of stuff, and I know you're aware of it and things. But what we done was, we collaborated together. It was like, because our manager the first 2 years was very strong-headed. It's my way or the highway. You do as I say, and obviously he's from Scotland, and that's the way a lot of Scottish coaches are like. They tell you to do something, you do it. But then that's whenever, I guess, he realised, and we realised, even me as well, it's good to have collaboration between the players and the coaches, because even in terms of business, I remember reading, I think it was Theo Paphitis, he was one of the Dragons' Den back in the day, and like he used to say, like, his secret is he goes to the actual stores and asks the people that are working full time there, or doing the actual shift, like, what sort of problems are you having during the day? And he was like, it might be that they're using one till. They've only got one till, and the lineup's out the door. So they were like, it's so stressful, we could do with another till. And he went to the ground floor, he would go to the ground floor in his businesses. He had maybe 500 stores, and that's how he ran his business. He was like, look, the employees, they're the ones that give you the answers. So in terms of football, it's good to ask the players, because players don't go onto the pitch to play bad, and they might have bad games, but it could be because you have set up a player wrong, or there's some sort of tactic that's not giving them. You know, I watch Man United. I'll take Marcus Rashford for an example, and if you play Marcus Rashford on the right, he knows he's there just to do a shift. You know, you put him on the left and he comes to life. Mm-hmm. He loves coming inside on his right foot, and he's he's playing on the front foot when he's on the left, whereas on the right it's just like a shift for him because he can't come inside and shoot with his left foot. So, in terms of obviously, whenever I go into coaching, that's one of the things that I'll always do is ask the players individually, like, what are you finding difficult? What do you think could help? And then sort of have a chat with each other and come up with a solution. Because Albert had to play left-sided centre-back at Edmonton because the guy from Senegal, he didn't like playing left-sided centre-back. And Albert's like, well, I don't like playing left-sided centre-back, but he's a captain, he's a leader, he has to take responsibility and sacrifice himself slightly, which he done. So then when he goes to left-sided centre-back, and obviously a lot of teams target a right-footed centre-back that's playing on the left, because they know once he brings that ball on his left foot, that's whenever they can trigger their press. Mm-hmm. And at that time, that press came in. You've seen Liverpool do it over the last few years, phenomenal at it. You know, if say they were playing Man United and say Smalling was playing left-sided centre-back, as soon as he took it, Salah went, Firmino went, and they all pressed because he's uncomfortable on his left foot. And Albert had that same problem. But again, that's where obviously myself and Albert would talk and come up with solutions on how to do it and how to sort of deceive the opposition, knowing that they're going to do that. And a couple of little things we would come up with is, you know, we would tell the left back, now as soon as it goes to Albert, you need to drop 10 yards so Albert can give it to you. And that's pulled up that's made them give them their press. And it could be they've pressed high, the left backs came back. It gave Albert a simple solution to pass to the left back. And sometimes the left back would go back to the goalie, and then the goalie would hit the diagonal ball over to the right because their whole team's pressed. And as players, we came up with that ourselves, but it was to help Albert so he wouldn't get caught in possession of the ball, because we knew teams were going to target him for being a right footer on the left. And Albert's not the greatest player on the ball. Albert's just an old school centre back. He's not bad on the ball, but he's not the guy to hit 60-yard diagonal balls, is what some centre backs can do. So we had to come up with a solution that, okay, we don't want, once we pass the ball to Albert and we know they're going to press, we don't want Albert to be stuck on the ball. We want to be a step ahead. And that was one of the things. The left back would drop, play it to him, go back to the goalie. Sometimes Albert would play to the left back. Teams knew that the left back's going to go back to the goalie. And it might be the guy that closes down Albert, or the other striker, would cut that off. Mm-hmm. So then I would say to Albert, just step you into like a holding midfielder. And that would have been going against, I guess, what the manager's philosophy was, because he wouldn't have wanted that. But that was a solution. So then we were like, okay, if the manager has a go at you, we'll get the holding midfielder to take away his man, and then I'll come under. So we played a 4-1-4-1. There's back in the video because I'm obviously stuck coaching still, and see us implemented ourselves. But we started to come up with solutions ourselves, and all it was finding a solution and making sure everybody was on the same page in terms of how the opposition pressed. So for us as players, we sort of started to learn about the coaching side ourselves, and it made us respect the coach a lot more, because we knew what job at hand that he had on his hands. That he has to come up with 6 million solutions in a game, and it's just not possible to do. But we did work on it, and we made the playoffs, and it made every single one of our players better as well.
Could you imagine coming up against him at some stage? Because as you said, you've gone through your coaching badges, so has he. Could the pair of you one day be managing an opposing dugouts?
Opposing dugouts are the same dugouts, not a problem. You know, whenever it comes to that's why the two of us, I think, became really close in terms of, you know, friends and football side of things, because I could bounce off stuff and learn from the defensive side, and he bounced off stuff to learn from the attacking side. And then I would have learned from the defensive side of what they're trying to do, which made me a better attacker, and he vice versa. You know, but again, with me, if someone was to say, "Hey, you're a head coach tomorrow," I'd be like, "Right, I need a defensive coach," and he'd be the first person to call. And I'd be like, "Albert, all the defensive stuff, that's your job. I honestly don't care. If we can see 3 goals, I'll just say, like, what's happening here? Sort it out, and that's it. That's his department. That's the way I would look at it."
Yeah,
I think he would, and he said the same thing to me as well in terms of the attacking side. You know, just leave it to do your role. But yeah, like, we never know. Like, the thing is, in football, you don't know where it's going to take you. Like, even in the winter there, like, I got offered 2 coaching roles in Canada, and like, me and my wife have moved so much over the last few years. We've got a son now, and he's settled in his daycare. I didn't really get to play much last year because of COVID. It was only like 7 games or so we played, and I was injured for most of it. Or I was injured before it, so I was basically fighting fit for the tournament that we played, and I was playing about 65%. So I wasn't myself. You know, so I was like, I still want to play. I want to lift a trophy as a player, and hopefully my sons are on the pitch as well. Even if it's away, I'll flam out with my wife, and that's my goal. But yeah, again, football, I've had went through too many experiences to know where it's going to take you, because from an early age, I was at Rangers, and then all of a sudden I've signed for Portsmouth. I'm in Portsmouth. And then, okay, I'm signing for Luton, and then the next day I'm not. And I'm playing for Glentoran. Never thought in my life I would have been playing for Glentoran. And then I moved to Linfield, and never thought in my life I would have made the move. First of all, playing for Glentoran, and then moving across, because it very rarely happened then. Like, before me, I think the last one was Justin McBride, from what I was told, and I think that was maybe 10 years or 15 years prior to it.
You opened the floodgates.
And then, you know, with Sean Ward, Jimmy Gallagher, George Stewart, just opened them up. But yeah, and then I ended up in Canada. Honestly, didn't think I would have ended up in Canada. Then I was down in America, and I was back in Canada, and then I was playing for Sligo. Honestly, that's just the way football is. And I had a call with one of our goalkeepers a few weeks ago. You know, he wasn't sure what was happening with him. He wasn't offered a new contract. Nothing was coming up. He called me for advice, and I says, "Look, don't worry about it. Something always comes up. Make sure you stay fit. Make sure you're working hard. You know, keep a good attitude. Keep a positive mind frame." And he did. And he called me last week, and he says, "Hey, I've got an offer in the Philippines." I says, "There you go." He's like, "It's a very good offer as well." I says, "Well, brilliant. Speak with your agent." And then he calls me the next day, and he's like, "Hey, Valor's offered me a new contract." So within 2 days, he's got 2 offers on the table. I was speaking to him yesterday. He's still talking. I think he's going through our offer now with the manager. But, you know, I said to him, like I told you, something always comes up, because I was in that position before I went to Sligo. Um, 2018, I was with Edmonton. We were with Edmonton and the NASL folded. So Edmonton were waiting to go to the CPL in 2019. So they weren't playing 2018. And my wife was pregnant. So I went home to start my coaching badges. And a couple of teams were interested. There was a couple in Scotland actually were interested, Ross County and stuff. So I was going to go over as like a trial type basis, or they were going to put me through like fitness work just to make sure I was fit, because they had good recommendations for me. But my wife, she couldn't fly. She had some blood condition in her legs with the pregnancy, and so we're not able to leave Canada until the baby was born. But then a lot of other stuff went on within Canada in the league and how they were signing players. It didn't do me any favours. So we flew home because we had the baby. We wanted the family to see the baby as well. And then I was training with Linfield, training with Lauren, needed to stay fit. And Healy and Tiernan were letting me train. And Albert was up training with Lauren. He just came back from Iceland, and Tiernan and Healy were asking me, like, what's my plan? They obviously couldn't sign me until January, I guess. But I wasn't really fit. I wasn't match fit compared to all the other players, and then my agent actually calls me and says, look, what about Sligo? Sligo are looking the midfielder, Liam Buckley, the manager, he remembers you from your Glentoran days, because he was obviously coached St. Pat's and all that. And I was like, oh, right. But I was thinking of going back to Canada to play. So they were it would have been March time I would have went there. But then I was we were staying in my mum and dad's house, and they were like, there's a game in Ballymallard. I'm like, right, I'll jump in my dad's car, because I didn't have a car. I was using my dad's car. The game got called off because of the snow. It says, right, there's another game in Athlone. And I'm like, where's Athlone? I'm like, that's even further. So I drove down on the Friday. They put me up in the hotel. We were actually to train on the pitch on the Friday. Pitch was frozen. So we had done a run in the forest. That was my trial, the first trial, a run in the forest with Sligo. We went down to Athlone. They had AstroTurf pitch. Half of it was frozen, I think. So I played well. And after the game, they made me an offer. And it says my wife gave me an offer. And he said, well, are they going to provide a house or anything? Because obviously we were in my mum and dad's. And it says to the manager, as long as you get us a house or an apartment, my wife was off maternity anyway, from Canada. So they were like, yes, we can do it. And all of a sudden I found myself down first game away to Dundalk. Hadn't played a game, like a proper game, in 15 months. And we're playing away to Dundalk. And we got a 1-1 draw at Dundalk as well, But as I say, you don't know where it's going to take you. I didn't think I would have ended up playing for Sligo. And had an absolute fantastic time there. And then I come back to Canada and with Valor. So as I said, in terms of coaching as well, if I do become a coach, I want to become a coach, but football, you never know what's going to happen. You don't know where that's going to take you as well, because I could go in it for a year and not like it, and I might say, you know what, it's not really for me, or I could go in and excel at it and love it, which I think that the latter is my mindset at the minute. I do love it. I love helping players get better and all that. So yeah, and it could be I'd go in and do fantastic and get a lucky break. And I was actually speaking to Albert the other day. I says, imagine me and you went into coaching and ended up in LA coaching Will Ferrell's team.
Yeah.
I says, the two of us would just look at each other and say, what's going on here? But again, I says to him,
you never
it's
know.
Not impossible.
Nothing. Yeah, no, nothing's impossible.
Yeah. So you have to sort of look at it and be positive and work at it and get better at it. But for me this year, it's like same with Albert. You don't know if it's going to be your last year or not. And I got offered a couple of coaching jobs there, but it wasn't the right time to hang the boots up with my family. My wife settled here in Winnipeg. My son's at daycare. But if a good coaching job comes up and it suits me and my family, then I'll say that's me. I'm done with playing. I'm going to go into the coaching side of things. But again, you can't you can't just pick and choose. You have to wait for the moment and be ready for it. And for me to transition into coaching, that's where I'm at this stage. But right now, it's 100% on the pitch. And try and give me all, but you never know. And that's the thing. The point I'm trying to get. Football is very unpredictable. Every game is unpredictable, and then where you end up is unpredictable. You know, and it happens to the best coaches, and it happens to the unfortunate coaches as well, and players as well. You know, so you can take Chelsea, for example. Thiago Silva's playing centre back. He leaves PSG. Next minute, the PSG manager becomes a Chelsea manager, and he's sitting on the bench. That's just the way it works. You know, so it's to do with a lot of things, relationships, opinions. Everyone has their opinion in the game. And again, it's about timing as well. If someone likes you and thinks that you can do a job for them, and if it suits you and you're able to give 100%, then it's a good match. So yeah, it's a lot to digest. But for me, right now, I'm just training every day and getting ready for the season coming up. And hopefully we can possibly win something this year here. Obviously, it's only the third year, but the league is growing. I heard they're trying to start a second division as well here. I'm not too sure the ins and outs of it. But again, it's just focusing on I've always done, get better as a player, even though again I'm not going to be as good as I was 5-10 years ago, but I can still, as me and Albert, we speak to each other, it's like, look, as long as you're still valued as a team and you can churn out results, that's all that matters. Because when you're in the men's game, it's about winning. You know, in the youth development, it's about development. You know, you don't have to win at that age. But once you go into the men's game, it's like, right, you have to win. And if you don't win, you lose your job. Or if you don't perform well, you lose your job. It's like every other business in the world. If you don't do well and don't perform at your job, you end up losing it. Unless your dad owns a company or you own a company, and then you're good.
Yeah, the percentages are you'll lose. You'll lose at some stage. But you've had a great career. You've so many winners' medals, and you know the double with Linfield, which we didn't even really talk about, but winning the league and the Irish Cup in the same season, a fantastic achievement. So much of what you said, I think, for young players listening, will just be great learning points for them, and to try and understand that, like, no such thing as a career without adversity. So get that out of your head. There's no straight lines in this business, but it's about how you overcome them, how you bounce back and respond. And you've done that time and time again. Edmonton's all-time record goal scorer. Just had to get that in there. It's a nice thing to add to all those winners' medals too. You've done so well, and I've no doubt you'll be a very good coach, Daryl. Just before I let you go, for anybody thinking about, because you know what we're like in Northern Ireland, we're home birds typically. So yeah. Being atypical, and you've travelled about a bit, you know, for players here, should they be thinking, instead of going Scotland or England, should they be thinking further afield maybe?
Yeah, why not? For me, the first and foremost, like the quality, the best quality level you can play at will be obviously in England. And to try and aim for where Stephen Davis and the Dallases and the Johnny Evans have got to, that's obviously your ultimate aim. But not all of us can make it at that. The likes of me, I almost made it at that. But I just didn't quite make it at that. And, you know, and that's the thing, is you have to just give 100% every time and you'll find your place. But that doesn't mean your place is secure. You know, and again, it's whenever, if they move to America or move to Canada, it's a lifestyle change. It's not just a game. Like me and my wife moved here, Albert obviously in 2013 as well, moved for a lifestyle change to start a family. So the kids can grow up in a different place and have better opportunities, because obviously I've lived in Canada, you've been to Canada and see how things work differently here. And again, they work differently in America, but it's like, it's what suits you really and what you're trying to find. But in terms of a player, like if anyone wants to, even anyone in the Irish League, and I've obviously had players reach out to me and stuff, hey, can you get me a move to your team or whatever? And it just doesn't work like that. The first thing that they have to do is, if they want to move abroad, is we don't tend to do it back home because it's seen as he's full of himself. You know, it's to make a highlight reel of all your best moments. And the younger kids are starting to do it now. But, you know, if we make a highlight reel and throw it on our, like I'm talking 5 years ago on our Instagram, it's like, he loves himself. Yeah. And who does he think he is? That's our mindset back home. But that's the very first thing that you need to do. You need to make a highlight reel of your goals, of your good passes, of your tackles, of your general play. And that is, the highlight reel is basically that's like sending a cover letter to an employer. For them is to look at your cover letter and go, you know what, it's worth looking at his resume, and then possibly getting an interview. And the interview is basically a trial. And everyone does it in the business world as well. But that's the first thing that a player needs, is basically a highlight reel. So the coaches can look at it and go, you know what, there's something about him. He's a good player. But now they need to verify something else, maybe a full game, need to watch him live. And that's a thing. But, you know, it's not easy to move across the world. It's certainly not easy, but it's like, the way I looked at it was, let's go for it. We can always return home. That's the way we looked at it. We can always turn back home. We've got family back home. And even living here, it's still hard because all of our best friends live back home and all our family lives back home. FaceTime makes it a lot easier for sure. You know, but it's like here in Winnipeg, like my best friend is my wife and her best friend is me. You know, we built up a lot of good friends in Edmonton and we still have a lot of friends there, but now we're in Winnipeg, a different city. And, you know, it's not as if you can drive a couple of hours. If you want to drive, you're driving 13, 14 hours to get there. Or you need to jump on a plane. And then with COVID, it's not possible. Yeah. So if you want to, if anyone back home wants to go for it, and like me and Albert, we're certainly not the first. And we won't be the last going across and giving it a go. Johnny Steele was actually before me. He was at Wolves and then he ended up in Kansas. He played for New York Red Bulls, and he still lives in America. And he actually played for Minnesota, that game that we were talking about. Played in that game. But yeah, it was like, honestly, you could sit here for days and me and Albert could tell you so many stories about here. But now the team that we're with, we're in Canada. We don't go to America no more. But again, if any player wants to come over here, it's like, oh, the Canadians are not good at it and the Americans are not good at football. Like, you'll be very, very surprised. Because in Canada here, we're developing players. You know, you just look at Rangers with Scotty Arfield playing, Alphonso Davies playing for Bayern Munich. Yeah. There's a couple of younger players that's in the French league, the German leagues now that you wouldn't have really heard of. So the standard is getting bigger for sure. You know, but if any player wants to come over here, you know, make a highlight reel, send it to me. I'll forward on to the people here that can look at it and then hopefully get you a move, because there's actually a Canadian player here. It was actually a couple of days ago. I got a message. I played with him in Edmonton and he played for Ottawa last year, and Bohemians have inquired about him. The Bows down in Dublin. Like, what's he like, and as a person and as a player? And I can say, look, I can't speak highly enough. He's a quality player, quality person, and with the coaches that Bohemians have, they're going to make him a better player. You know, and that was through.
Who's that?
I can't really say who the player is because the deal's
Fair
not
enough.
done yet, in case it falls through for him. I'm hoping it goes through in the next few days. But it actually, the point of contact came from a player Canadian I played with in Sligo, Chris Twardick. Chris went from Sligo. He came through at Millwall. He went to Sligo. He wasn't having a real good season, like, to start off with. And I would see him in training every day, and left foot, right foot, the fittest player, quick, skills. I'm like, he's too good for Republic of Ireland. But some of the Irish boys, the Southern boys, were like, he's a Jew, he's brain dead, because he'd done everything 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I could see him in training, he's leaving people for dead. He's scoring goals left, right and centre. He's a right midfielder. So I actually took it upon myself. I was going through my A licence at the time. I went over and says, Chris, I'm going through my coaching. I'd like to apply some of the stuff that I'm learning and put it to you as an individual. And actually, the majority of it was psychology stuff, you know, and little types of movements. And this was May. And we started working on it and training after training, and I would help him out. Because I played a right-sided centre midfielder and he played right midfield, so I needed him and he needed me, along with a right back, in terms of that little unit on that side. And all of a sudden, June comes, player of the month. July comes, player of the month. One of the best players in the league. Setting up goals, scoring goals. Then he goes to Bows. Bows signing, they finished third. They got to Europe, so they got more money. Their contract goes to Bows. Plays half a season there, and a team from Poland. They played someone in Europe, and he played well, and ended up he's in Poland, playing in the top league in Poland now, and he's excelling out there. You know, he's playing against some of the top teams in Poland now. So it was actually him who contacted me about him, and says, look, Bohemians are interested in him. What's he like? And I just says that, give him a good recommendation, and that's just how it works. So now it's down to Bows to do their due diligence on him, and if they want to sign him or not. But again, I don't get any money out of it. His agent's going to get the money out of it.
You should do, maybe.
Chris is not going to get the money out of it. But again, that's in terms of players that you've played with and stuff. Sort of the good guys in the game. You always try and help them out for sure. And the hard workers that deserve a break, because he played in Ottawa last year, and they've got a Spanish coach, and he sort of wants to implement a different game plan, and bring in more Spanish players because they're owned by Atletico Madrid. You know, so they've just signed a player in his position, and they basically let him go. You know, and any other team should have snapped him up like that, but it doesn't work like that here. It works a little bit different. So now Bohemians are interested, and I haven't spoke to him. I need to follow up with him to see if it's come through. It might not go through. Someone else may come up. Again, that's just how sort of the ins and outs of it works in a player side.
It's really interesting. So there you go. There's your homework for any player that's watching this and thinking about making the move. Get that highlight reel made up before you go and bother Daryl with your, can I come to Canada, please? And
that's the thing, that it just so happened that my highlight reel, like, you touched on adversity. And the biggest bit of adversity I had in my career was Alan McDonald leaves Glentoran. You know, we got to the finals in Untitled Cup. We didn't start well. And then Alan leaves, and then Scott takes over. And in the following season, Scott obviously wants to implement the stuff. And the club had financial problems. So it just so happened that there was me, Hamilton, Shane McCabe, Andy Waterworth, Richard Clark. We were the 5 top earners. So the club just threw the 5 of us on the transfer list. even though we had just signed, I think we just signed like Keith Gillespie the year before, get him. We signed Kieran Martin from Derry, so we signed players on more money that actually took the club over the budget. And then I found myself on the transfer list, and Linfield wanted to trade me with Mark Muskimmin. Mark Muskimmin was at Linfield at the time, so I'm like, happy days, no problem. And I was on a good contract at Glentoran because we just made the Setanta Cup. St. Pat's actually wanted to sign me, and St. Pat's were paying like really good money down there. So I was able to get a good contract at Glentoran. Alan, I says, look, I'm happy here. And Alan was like, right, let's get it done. I got a real good contract at Glentoran. But Linfield had a wage structure, so to speak, that players couldn't really go over whatever their structure was. And I would have earned more than every single Linfield player whenever I was at Glentoran, just so it happened. But because they had top players, I was maybe you probably class me as one of the top 3-4 players in Glentoran. But then when you look at Linfield squad, I think you're lucky to make the starting 11. Like that was the difference at the time, in terms of the players that they had. Because I wasn't just going to walk in playing in front of Peter Thompson. You were walking in playing in front of Mulgrew Galt, and even Robert Garrett, because they had just won a league, and they were dominating. They were seen as the best players in the league. When you go to Linfield, you have to go and fight for your position. So it ended up that Linfield made me an offer. It was basically half of what I was getting at Glentoran, and I had a year left, and I had a mortgage to pay, and my interest rates just went up my mortgage, and I was like, I can't afford, and I was working in the Olympia Leisure Centre part-time, and I was like, I could possibly go full-time, but the shifts are, you do 6 weeks in the morning, and then you do 6 weeks in the evening. We trained in the evening time. It wasn't possible to go full-time. I had to stay part-time or get another job. But my goal was to go back to full-time football. I needed that extra time to do extra training. So anyway, I couldn't do it. And Scott Young, Pete Beattie were pissed off at me. So pre-season came, running the life out of us, put us through so much training. Pete was in the military, so he put us through some military training. And at that time, I was like very, very skinny, very fit as well. But the training Pete put us through, and I took it upon myself working in the Olympia Leisure Centre. I would actually do extra gym sessions after my shift. And then all of a sudden, I started to feel stronger, feel sharper. I could jump higher. And for 90 minutes, and I felt like it was full time again back at Portsmouth when I was on top of my game. Whereas over the previous years, it sort of slid away, playing part time. But what that adversity done and the training done was, even sometimes we would do possession games, and I was stuck in the team that was always defending, because Glentoran still wanted me off the wage budget, and because it fell through, they knew that no one else is going to pick up my wages. And I was saying, look, I want to go to Linfield. I cannot do it financially at this moment. I need to juggle a few things in whatever it is, juggle a few things around. I can't do it right now, because I bought my place at the height of the property market and it crashed. So I was stuck in the bubble, and the interest rates changed a couple of years later, and it killed me slightly. But then it ended up that the first game of the season came, Distillery. Gary Hamilton was injured. They were still trying to get him loaned to Glenallen. Shane McCabe left to go to Portadown. But Gary Hamilton was injured. Matty Burrows was injured. Scott Young started to play a 4-3-3 the first time we sort of implemented it. And Andy Waterworth was our only striker left. But he wanted to play Andy Waterworth right midfield. So I went to Pete and says, look, throw me up front. He's like, you can't play up front. I says, I played up front for Mal Donaghy's under-19s team a couple of years ago. I scored 4 against Serbia. He was like, right, I'll speak with the manager. So the day before the game, I says, the most obvious thing was put Andy Waterworth through the middle and put someone else right midfield. We had Andy Hall, who's at Glenavon now. He was a young player coming through. I was like, put Andy Hall right midfield and put Andy Waterworth through the middle and have Neil Gawley at the time on the left. You know, if you don't want to play me, but you can put me through the middle with a little bit of experience and I'll do a job for you. Like, I'll not promise you I'm going to play well, but I'll do a job for you until Matty Burrows or Gary Hamilton are back fit. And the first game of the season came to Surrey. And because all that training I was put through, and I was back to a level of what I'd done with Portsmouth, I was sharp, I was fit, you know, and I was never a quick player. I was never a strong player, but I was strong, and I was able to take that touch away from players and get away from them again. And I scored 5 in that game. And as the season went on, I went back into midfield and scored some quality goals. I was able to have a highlight reel, you know what I mean? And pull them off the BBC Sport website. We didn't have the technology we had then. I was able to go on and pull it off. Now you can just, you can hit Shift Command and F4 or something, and you can get the video now on your computer.
Yeah, screen
now
recording.
You had to download the whole screen and crop it somehow. And Glentoran had their own TV, Glentoran TV at the time as well. So I was able to have a highlight reel and send that on to whatever club needed. You know, and whenever it came to moving abroad, you know, I was able to send it to Edmonton and basically get a trial type thing basis, but knowing that, you know, I'm good enough to play.
What was your best goal on it?
The best goal on it was probably, there was a goal down at Newry. Hit it from about 30 yards straight into the top corner. And you can still see in the videos, Jimmy McGovern, he was playing right back for us, and he's just standing with his hands on his head, couldn't believe it. And I came out of half time, and Scott Young just shook his head and hit me a slap in the head. Because the pitch was terrible. It was striking it off mud, and I caught it sweet. But that year I scored a smasher against the Distillery, against Coleraine, away to Dungannon. Like proper strikes from outside the box. I caught them well. But yeah, I had a good highlight reel, and I scored 25 goals that year. So if you send a highlight reel with 25 goals in one season, you know, doesn't matter what coach you are, you're going to look at it. And then obviously I scored a few goals for Linfield as well that I was able to add on to it. And I had that on my computer that I was able to send at the right moment. And, you know, the right moment was me and my wife wanted to emigrate, and Albert was in the same decision. And like, I was able to send that across and sort of get an opportunity and hopefully make it work, which we did do. But for every young player, that's what you really need. You need a highlight reel, because that's your cover letter if you're going for a job. That's your evidence to show that, hey, I'm a half decent player. But then the coaches have to do their due diligence to make sure, because remember at Edmonton, we signed a couple of boys for highlight reels. Like, a couple of them were playing against Ronaldinho and stuff, like class players. But whenever you bet on an 11, he wasn't that type of player. You needed him. Playing with five-a-side, best player in the world. 11, he wasn't that type of player. So coaches actually have to go and do their due diligence and watch full games and stuff like that. But that's what you need. And thankfully, I have there's all stuff online now that you can watch. The coaches can use, like Instat and Y-Scout, and there's all different software programs now that players don't know that they're on them.
Yeah. And
they can scout them. But the problem is as I said, some of the guys, the season here starts, you know, ours starts, and we're not starting until the end of May because of COVID now, but they're coming at the end of their season, and we have already filled up most of our squad. So if you become available, there's very little room as an international player. Like the likes of us, we have used all our international spots, nearly every other team. So if, for example, a player in the Irish League wants to come here, there's no opportunity there. So the timing, again, it's all about timing. You have to have your highlight reel and have it ready for come the end of our season, October, November, December time, when teams are starting to sort out their squads for next year, and then that's whenever you're still in the middle of your contract back home. So can you get out of your contract, because no one's going to pay money for you. It's not the Premier League we're here, so that's why it's difficult as well. And whenever me and Albert moved, it was the end of January, and Linfield were excellent about it, and he says, look, this is, David Jaffrey was excellent about it. It's a lifestyle change. You look, I'm still here. Obviously, Albert's back in Lauren, but I'm pretty confident that he'll end up back in Canada at some stage. He's enjoying his time at Lauren, and he's playing fantastically well. He might see his career there. Or he might go into coaching there and then come out here. I don't know. It could be 1 year, it could be 10 years, it could be 15 years. You just never know in football. And the same with me. Obviously, I'm here now, but I get offered a coaching job somewhere in a few years' time, and it suits me and my family somewhere else that we don't know.
That's what makes it so exciting, isn't it?
It's exciting, and it's obviously scary as well, because now I have a lot more responsibilities with a kid. But again, any player, don't just think, oh, I'll send a highlight reel, I'll get a job or I'll get a team. And if you're lucky to get a team abroad and go over and experience something new, actually the hardest part is actually moving. It's whenever you have all your stuff packed and your room's empty or your house is empty the night before, and you realize you got to get up the next morning. It's going to bed that night thinking, oh, is this a good thing? And you start having doubts. And it's natural. And that's where you have to say to yourself, I've made a decision, I'm going to go for it, and stick by your decision and don't have any regrets. So that's, people get homesick, as you said. I'm never the person that gets homesick, so to speak. I don't know why. Now it's like, this is my home now, so it's fine. Obviously, I just miss my dad and a couple of friends and my mum, family like that. But again, with FaceTime, it makes it a lot better. Whenever I was in Portsmouth, we didn't have FaceTime or anything like that. So the weekends were difficult. But now like kids nowadays, you've got everything to keep you occupied. Computers, PlayStations, internet, phones, whatever you want. You just pick up your phone and you can do it if you want.
Look at the two of us having a chat. You're sitting there and I'm sitting here, and yet we're able to see each other and do this. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and that's a thing. And back, like, obviously, whenever I moved, we didn't have that.
Yeah.
Whenever I moved to Canada, we had Skype, but it was always jumping and it would cut off all the time.
You're only 34, by the way. You sound like you're 54 saying that. In my day.
That's the thing, because I'm my whole team, all the players here now, like, a lot of them are younger, in their early 20s. And some of them even come to me for advice. And I'm like, what are you asking me for? And I realise that they've actually haven't been through that. Maybe it's even relationship advice. One of the players saying, hey, if I'm still with my girlfriend, but if I have to move teams, how do I manage that? And I'm like, hold on a minute, I'm not a love person.
Dr. Phil or something.
Yeah. So I just like, well, just to make a decision and go for it and try and help them. But again, whenever you're giving advice, you're giving advice, and at the end of the day, they have to make their own decision.
Yeah, of course.
They have to make their own decision, whatever it is. And that way they'll grow up a lot stronger themselves, because they'll be more independent. They'll make decisions for themselves, and they'll go by trial and error. And the best thing that you can learn from are your mistakes.
When I said you were coming on this, Daryl, Seamus Heath sent me a wee message and said he's a great role model for any young player. Make sure you listen to what he says, and I can see why. You've been full of great advice, and it sounds like you're a great asset for Valor, not just on the pitch, but around the club as well. I could talk to you for another 2 hours, but we'll leave it here. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And I really appreciate it. And for me, even just to speak to you as well. Like I hear your voice on the websites all the time doing the game.
God help you.
It's better listening to Andy Waterworth when he's on anytime. But no, thank you, and I want to wish you all the best, and hopefully at least one person can take something away from it, whatever it is. But believe in yourself. That's like Northern Ireland national team had the best slogan, so to speak, Dare to Dream, and the fans believed it, and the players believed it, and you go to the Euros, and that's what belief can do. So just believe in yourself, because there's not many other people that will believe in you, believe it or not. So believe in yourself and go for it, and just keep improving yourself. That's all you can do.
Thank you for listening to the Michael Clark Show podcast. You can follow me at mclarkshow on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Check back every Wednesday for a brand new episode, which you can download as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also watch the entire interview via my YouTube channel. That is youtube.com/The Michael Clark Show. And if you like our theme song, it has been kindly provided by the brilliant SX70. Search for SX-70 on Spotify to stream their music. Until next Wednesday, take care. I'll speak to you soon.